You're listening to Were You Still Talking? I'm just looking at one of your websites to use as a cheat sheet. All right. Hey, thanks for listening once again. This is Joel Albrecht, and this is Were You Still Talking? Today on the show, I have John Pabon. He is an author, consultant, and speaker helping businesses and individuals make sense of sustainability. This is a project that I'm very passionate about, and so this is a very important guest to me. He has worked with dozens of companies, both consulting and working in them. He has spent 2 decades in the business of saving our Earth. After leaving his role in the United Nations, he traveled the world studying the impacts of sustainability firsthand in factories, on fields, and in Fortune 500s. He shares his message through books, the consulting business, and keynote speaking to audiences around the world. He is the author of 2 books. The first one, and I do love this title, Sustainability for the Rest of Us, Your No Bullshit 5-Point Plan for Saving the Planet. It's been described as a foundational read for practical sustainability in the 21st century and one of the best sustainability resources available to date. That's pretty big. That's huge. He's also excited to be helping consumers make smarter choices, that would be me, and decisions through his recently published second book, The Great Greenwashing: How Brands, Governments, and Influencers Are Lying to You. How can you say an influencer lies to you? And also, this is something, I mean, I've known about this for a long time. So I'm always looking at the whole, I guess you've coined a phrase now, greenwashing, but I've always looked at certain organizations and stuff and thought, what? Come on. So welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I can't take credit for the word greenwashing. Someone came up with that well before I did, but hopefully with the book, more people will learn about what it is.
Right. I think more people maybe need to have their eyes opened a little bit about what that is, because it's obvious to some of us, but maybe not to all of us. So, I mean, I like to start with a small question, and then, we can just have a conversation. But my biggest question and sort of concern, it grew bigger while I was stewing during COVID with nothing else to do. Do we have a chance? I know that's a hard one, but
question.
Yeah, it's just a little thing
to get us
it's
formed
like,
up. We do have a chance, and I think I'll preface all of this by saying I'm not an activist. I'm not a greenie. Hugging the trees, saving the polar bears, that's great. It's not my thing. I approach saving the planet very much from a dollars and cents angle. That's why I've sort of worked in consulting for my entire career. I work with businesses, even though people might say that's me selling out. I am a big proponent of using the private sector and business to push things forward, because first off, they got us in the mess, so they should fix it. But second, they have access to capital and resources that governments and individuals just don't have. Some of these are the size of entire countries. So that's why I work with them to get them going in the right direction. And because of what I'm actually seeing behind the scenes, things they don't necessarily talk about to consumers, but the things that I do see, that gives me hope, because I have seen the positive changes that these companies are making at scale. I have seen things going in the right direction. And yes, for most people, we see the news, we read the headlines, and it's all doom and gloom. That's just a very small part of what's going on. There's much more on the positive side than the negative side. And I know that's hard for people to hear, because everything we look at is like, oh no, we're totally screwed. But I think if I had a crystal ball, which I wish I did, because then I'd be a billionaire. But if I had a crystal ball, I would say 10 or 15 years from now, the world's going to look entirely different than how it looks today, in a good way. So for consumers, for example, we go to the store now, we have to do research, we have to pay more if we want to make the right choice. But the way capitalism is taking care of sort of these old dinosaurs that aren't playing ball, they're not going to be around much longer, honestly. So 10, 15 years from now, we'll go to the store and all decisions we make are going to be the right decisions. But let's frame it, I guess, one more step further. Is the world going to look like some pastoral scene in a beautiful painting? No, that's not the goal. That's not what we're going to, get to. We're not living off the grid and being on a kibbutz. But it's not going to be Mad Max either. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. Is Mad Max a dated reference? I don't know.
It's not to me, and that
Okay.
they're making new ones now, so
Okay, perfect.
they
So
they
we'll
are
use Mad
making
Max.
new Mad. So hopefully people with Charlize Theron. I always forget how to pronounce her name. Anyway, that's why I had you on the show, because I had a feeling you would have a better take on it than I do lots of times. I get so like worried about things that I try and just push it away. But I've always had the same, from an outsider point of view. I've always had that same idea, especially when we find out little things like, our garbage company hasn't been recycling half of what we've been giving it. So they just stopped taking that. They've been still, we're not taking that anymore because we really haven't been doing that. And that tells me, okay, on my end, what am I going to do? It's like, come on, give me a break. So it's really good to hear that there are your point of view, that there are companies out there who do care, and that possibly they'll have to care. I actually read this idea in a book called Natural Capitalism like 20 years ago or something like that. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but it was along the lines of the more we look at our sustainability, what they were thinking of as nature, the more that companies look at nature and sustainability, the more money they make. So I guess I'm kind of curious, what's the holdup? Why isn't that caught on more? Because it still looks like people are, not people so much, big companies are really pushing away from being sustainable. And there's even a push, I don't know if there's a question here, but there's even a push towards marketing this whole thing of that people like myself are somehow evil, people who care about things, other people in the planet. And because I am a tree hugger, I'll go out and hug my tree right now, darn it, except it's cold and wet. But I've tried to do things for the planet forever, but not on the level that you are. So yeah, I guess my thing is, why aren't more companies, and maybe the ones you work for why aren't more companies catching on to, you make more money if you pay attention to this stuff.
So
There's profit.
yeah, absolutely. And
Right?
they have, especially these large multinationals, let's say the Fortune 1 or 2000. Like they know this, and it's been built into their processes and their strategies for several decades. Yeah, there's a few holdouts, right? I think in the great greenwashing, I talk about these major sectors of corporations. So we like to think there's hundreds of different sectors. There's not, there's like 20. But if we look at it and we sort of scale them out, there's those that will never be sustainable no matter what they do. Their business models are not conducive to being sustainable. Things like oil and gas, mining, defense, tobacco. These industries, unless they entirely change their business model, they can't be sustainable. So they go on one end of the spectrum. On the other end are those sectors that they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but usually they're a bit better than most. So those tend to be highly regulated sectors, medtech, pharmaceutical, finance, right? So again, not perfect, but they sit on the other end. All the others are stuck somewhere in the middle, varying shades of gray. We can't say one company per se is better than another, but sector by sector, we can sort of look at them and say, okay, there's stuff to be done, right? There's plenty of work to be done. No company is perfect, but most of them are trying to improve the things that they're doing. A couple issues, but the biggest one is that it's slow. These are big behemoths. They are massive battleships that we're trying to turn around in the water, and it's taking a lot of time. That will speed up as we go through and they start to adopt better practices. So it's more exponential than linear, but it does take a bit of time. And I think the second biggest issue, which we kind of touched on earlier, is they're not talking about it. They have a really bad time talking about the good things they're doing. I don't know where that comes from. I think it's a combination of not wanting to feel disingenuous by saying, oh, we're doing this amazing thing and bragging about it. But I also think their legal departments are probably really scared of getting in trouble for talking about any good thing that they're doing because of potential blowback from activists or regulators. So we tend not to hear about it, but there is a lot of great stuff happening. It's happening at scale. But none of that is to discount any of the amazing things that individuals are doing. I don't want to stop people from doing the recycling, going out and protesting, going out and working in your local community garden, do all of those things, continue doing that. But I think by and large, my message to people is to really consider, okay, is what I'm doing having the biggest potential impact possible? Is recycling my cans and my paper what I need to do to build a better future? Or is there something I can do that's going to be even more impactful? So it's more a challenge to people, because at the end of the day, we all want to have our efforts realize into something bigger. So why not put the best effort possible into that? You talked about recycling, and that's kind of a bugbear for me, because what most people don't know is that household recycling, at least in the United States, only makes up about 8 or 9% of all global recycling. The other 90+% comes from corporations. And even within that, there's only a small percentage of all of that recycling that can actually be recycled. The rest of it just gets dumped. Again, none of that is to dissuade you from recycling. Please keep recycling. It is such a win psychologically, because we have spent so much time conditioning people to do it that we need to continue to do that. But I think I say that just to point out the scale of the issues we're working with, and also to double back to the reason why I work with corporations, because the ability for them to change, and when they do change, is when we'll see exponential movements in the right direction.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense to me, because I worked in the garbage industry for a while, like hands-on recycling business, and I saw how much trash goes in, how much recycling goes in the trash, and how much trash goes in the trash. We in America, we throw away a lot of stuff, and I mean, it seems like the way you're going about it makes more sense, to try and convince corporations to do stuff on their own, because I've always thought, it seems like legislation wouldn't work. For one reason, it won't work in America is because no one's going to do it. No one's going to legislate here at this point in political history. And so, yeah, the other thing, but I've always thought it really needs to come from the corporate side. If we're using way too much plastics, and we're putting plastics in the rivers and oceans and all this stuff, and we need some 17-year-old to go out and try and clean up the oceans, maybe we need to stop using that kind of plastic, because you can make plastic out of cornmeal and my God, hemp and other things that, aren't as bad. So it's, it always seems to me that that's more not going after corporations, but in trying to influence corporations to do more. It seems like it's more on and again, like you said, of course we want to keep doing what we're doing, because it makes some difference.
Absolutely. And if we do a bit of a, take a look at the history of the modern sustainability movement, we talk about it usually starting around 1962. We usually pinpoint Rachel Carson's publishing of Silent Spring as kind of the start of the movement. And it was very different back then. It was not nearly to the scale of the issues we're facing today. And so because of that, the activist community played a vital role as the vanguard of really raising awareness and letting people know, hey, we have an issue here we need to address. And they did an amazing job. They've spent decades doing that, to the point that even and this is a fun fact that most people don't know, the first Earth Day in 1972, if you can wrap your head around this, was founded by a group of US senators. So politicians actually founded Earth Day, not activists, which is just mind-blowing. So that shows the impact that activists had on the political... Exactly, especially today.
Nuts. Yeah.
So that's the impact that the activists had on the political sphere. Corporations weren't really a player just yet, because then in the 1980s, we have this conglomerization of basically everything around the world. Politicians took a big step back, saying, hey, not our problem. Corporations got as greedy as they ever have been. And activists continue to try to fight the good fight. So that's when things started to get really out of hand, and the scale got too big, which leads us to today, which is a time where awareness is there. I think at this stage of the game, if somebody says they don't know there's something going on, they're not paying attention to anything going on, or they're purposely getting in the way. So raising awareness is no longer the thing we need to be doing. It's important, keep it going, but it's not the be all and end all. Now we need to be showing people how to convert that awareness into action. What do I do? I know there's something going on. What am I supposed to do about all this stuff going on? So activists and the raising awareness is, again, important, but not as important as it may have been in the past. Now the importance is that conversion. You touched on government. Governments around the world, with the exception of maybe just a small handful, have washed their hands of doing anything. That's because the political system in most countries is looking at a 2 or a 4 or a 6 year cycle, whereas with sustainability and building a better future, we're looking at 100 years, 150 years. So it's not on their radar. The latest statistics show that there are exactly 0 countries on track to meet their Paris climate targets, which come up in less than a year. So that just goes to show that the governments aren't doing what they're supposed to. Although we would love regulation to be in place, it's just not realistic right now for it to happen at scale. So again, we're back at corporations, the ones that got us in the problem, and the ones that have the ability to get us out of the problem. A bit of a history lesson, but I do love to throw in that Earth Day factoid for people. It was actually John Kerry, funny enough, that founded Earth Day. So
wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's followed him throughout his entire career, this trying to save the planet, and he's done a good job. So I hope he enjoys his retirement.
Yeah. There are people out there who were trying and are trying. I mean, because a lot of senators retire, keep doing the same thing. They keep working on the same problems. So what is? It's just so. It still seems so overwhelming to me, because you talk about 100 years in the future, and sometimes I hope we have 100 years. I mean, honestly. When I see certain things, not only the lack of some people caring, but the threat that we haven't had in, it seems like, decades of a nuclear showdown again. I mean, this hasn't happened since I was in my early 20s, and suddenly we're back at this precipice. It has nothing to do with sustainability, but I just, to me, sustainability is just as big of a problem. If we don't, if you can argue about who's going to be at the Super Bowl, and you can worry about, what car company is going to sell the most cars, and you can worry about whether or not we have birth control. It's not that is an important issue, but to me, if you don't have a sustainable planet, then why will that won't matter, right? Those issues it doesn't matter. And
that's absolutely right. And everything that I'm talking about us making it to the future, all of that's predicated on us not blowing ourselves up. So let's just be very clear.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
we can't really make it far if we decide to use the nukes finally. So no, I'm not putting that into the into my thinking process and the trajectory. But framing wise, I think it's also important to remember that when we talk about sustainability, you ask 5 people to define it, you're going to get 100 different definitions. But for me, sustainability is, and it's become a catch-all term for anything that builds a better future for the planet or for people. So those two fit in quite well together. So it is the green environmental side of things, which gets the lion's share of the PR. But it's also anything that helps to raise the livelihoods of individuals, to increase literacy, to increase lifespans, to give people decent work. All of these sort of things also fit squarely into sustainability, balancing them out. So balancing out the environmental plus all the social issues that you just touched on is not easy. We have a term in sustainability, which is just now starting to get out into public conversation, called a just transition. And to your earlier point of why isn't this happening faster, a just transition starts to explain why. If we think about an industry, a highly polluting one like oil and gas, we want it gone. We know it's bad for the environment, but in our current society, it serves a purpose. We can't get rid of oil and gas, because then we'll go back to the dark ages, which I'm not a proponent of. I don't want us living off the grid or giving up.
Then no one will have electricity for days.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So
I know that's not good
at all. Yes, you do. So in the interim, how do we phase out things like fossil fuels and transition to the use of things that don't require those nasty polluting companies to continue to operate? That's on an environmental side. On the social side, there are also massive implications. You can't just shut the doors of a company, because what do you do with the tens of thousands of workers that will now be out of a job? People that that's their expertise. They know nothing else. So then they can't feed their families because they have no income. So balancing that out is this idea of a just, meaning just, equitable, transition to something better. That's really slowing things down because we don't have the answers for that. And that can't be done quickly. It's a very slow, time-bound process. And I know people are going to say, but we don't have time. And I agree, we don't have time. But what we need to do, in my position on everything, is that we need to continue to move the needle in the right direction. We can't stop and say, oh, we can't do it because we can't just flip a switch and make it happen. That's not the right mindset. We need to continue to look at those things that are positive, the things that are going in the right direction, and continue to strive for better. And a great example is the movement towards electric vehicles. Now, when I was growing up, they talked about, I grew up in Southern California, we're going to have all electric vehicles by 1987. Obviously, that didn't happen. And people continued to kick the can down the road until finally, as much as I don't like the guy, Tesla came around and created a need for EVs, or at least the market for them. So that started the ball rolling. And now today, every major car company around the world has some sort of electric vehicle. I think Toyota was the last holdout. Last year, they finally launched one. So what that means is that having an electric vehicle is no longer a differentiator for these companies. They need to be thinking further of what is next. And I know that electric vehicles are super problematic. They're not perfect, but are they better than combustion engines? Absolutely. So that's the needle in the right direction. I don't work with car companies. I talk to plenty of sustainability folks in automotive, and there are companies that are currently looking at, okay, if an EV is no longer a differentiator, what do we do next? How can we make a more sustainable EV? Or, and this is a crazy one that I haven't even been able to get my head around totally just yet, there are at least two companies thinking, okay, what if we don't sell cars at all? What does that look like?
You mean there are car companies
talking about not selling cars?
Oh, that's amazing. That's so, well, I mean, they're thinking, because some of these companies what do we do? Everything.
Like, right. Exactly. So how do we diversify, or how do we potentially say, okay, we're no longer an automotive company. Now we invest entirely in public transportation systems. So they're thinking about this, and that's because they finally entered a virtuous cycle where they need to compete on being different, and being an electric vehicle producer is no longer a differentiator. So I think all of that is to say that there are moves in the right direction and these things are happening, but the transition is just a little bit slower than we would like it to be.
Right. When I really, something I saw recently that convinced me that electric vehicles are coming up. I mean, it's like the car companies have decided they have very little choice. And it was because Tesla blowing up the market. No one thought that thing would sell that well. I still don't know if he's made money on the car. It took him a long time. I drove one. I'm not wild about them, which I thought I would be. I love it when you put the electric pedal in. But otherwise, anyway, but here nor there. But the thing that really convinced me that they're here to stay is that I was watching a car auction that I watch on television a lot, and they brought in this 67 GTO. Looked absolutely beautiful like a 67 GTO should, and it had a Tesla driveline. And it sold for a lot of money. And I was thinking, okay, that really is, that's how the world is changing. Like, even people that are into these old cars that make a lot of noise want one with with a Tesla drivetrain, well, why not? So I just thought that was, it was showing the change. But that was one of my questions for you, actually. You said you are really into electric cars. Is changing over to, because there's a lot of, hoopla around now. I think a lot of misinformation about, are electric cars sustainable? Are they better than gas? And blah, blah, blah. I actually have a hybrid that goes 40 miles on electric, a plug-in hybrid. So most of the time it's electric, which is incredible. When the power just went out, we were really glad it was hybrid.
I bet.
But so how much of, something like driving an electric car, how much is that helping? And I know some of these companies are pulling back because of supply issues, I think, with batteries. So, how much does that make a difference? Is that one of,
Yeah, and the question we need to be asking is, when we look at this, for example, electric vehicles, is not, is an electric vehicle a sustainable, earth-friendly choice? Because if we just ask that question, the answer is no, it's not. The right question to ask is it better than what we had previously? And the answer to that is absolutely it is. So in that sense, we need to frame it the right way. And I think, as you mentioned, I wouldn't say it's misinformation that's getting out there. I think it's just framing things in a very incorrect way. So looking at, again, moving the needle forward, electric vehicles are the right way. But that doesn't mean we just sit on our laurels and say, okay, good enough, because that's not the case. We need to, and as I just said, companies are looking at what's next and how to make it even better so that maybe one day we do create a fully sustainable electric vehicle. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that's even possible, but at least the challenge is there for these companies to not just put their hands up and say, we're done.
Right. Right. And there was,
which is not up to, at the end of the day, it's not up to the consumers to be driving this change per se. It's really in the hands of these corporations. Consumers don't do the R&D for these things. They might be able to speak with their wallets, and that is a great indicator for companies of what they should be doing. That's one of the few silver linings of capitalism, is that companies respond to what the market wants. So if people are spending their money in the quote unquote right way, then companies will and have responded in turn in the right way to build a better EV in that case, or to implement better and more sustainable strategies into their business models, or to look at ways to diversify and push forward a just transition.
Right. That all makes sense.
We have capitalism. That's what we have to deal with. It's not going anywhere. I'm sure there's some brilliant economist thinking of, what's next, but until we get there, this is the reality we operate within. And I know people don't like to hear that, but it's what we're given. So, operate within reality, because the more you try to push against that reality, the more you're really going to not want to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And you probably should get out of bed in the morning. It's healthier than not.
It's good for you. And
it's good for you. But I've felt that a lot of times, like this capitalism, it's not working. And as certain things in America are changing and we're going back to the 50s, it shows me this more and more. It's like a lot of this I see is, well, it's because of capitalism. Our democracy is based on money now. It's not based on a democracy, and everything is. On the other side of that, when billionaires show people that they should sell electric cars, then everyone goes, oh, we should sell electric cars. So yeah, it's interesting. It can work both ways. So let's get into a little bit nitty gritty. What is the biggest thing? This is one of those, Today Show questions. What is the biggest thing that corporations could do to push forward sustainability, to help with sustainability?
There's two big answers. I think the first we touched on, which is to talk more about the things that they're doing in a genuine way that doesn't greenwash. It's not lying. It's just saying, hey, we've done X, Y, and Z. Yeah, we're not perfect. We're working on this stuff, but we're doing this. And the reason I say that's important is because the more companies do that, the more other companies will notice that and start to do the same. And you start to get the ball rolling, where companies that haven't even thought of being good, and there's plenty of those, start saying, hey, there's something to that. We're going to change too. But if all the cards are kept close to the chest and nobody talks about this, then it's left up to consultants like myself and McKinsey to be telling people to talk about it. So we don't want that. We need a little bit of help. So that's point number one of what corporations can do. The second, and this is something that grew out of the 1980s, which is the bane of my existence when it comes to helping companies be more sustainable and convince them to be more sustainable. And we alluded to this as well. Remember, sustainability, we're talking, decades, centuries. This is a long-term play, especially when it comes to corporations and changing the things they're doing. But executives and board members, they're measured quarter by quarter. So every 3 months, they need to deliver on something and have a KPI that's met. That's impossible with sustainability. We can't do that. So the conversations I have, especially at the board level or at the executive level, is trying to find a way to, within a corporation, marry those two trains of thought. Marry the short term, I need my KPIs or I'm going to get fired or miss my bonus, along with, okay, I need to think longer term about the sustainability of my business vis-a-vis these. I can't believe I just said vis-a-vis. Sorry. The sustainability of, I can't believe I said that out loud. The sustainability of my business, but also the sustainability of the planet. So balancing those two things out. Companies have been able to do that, and they're the ones that are much further along and much more evolved when it comes to being sustainable businesses. Those that have struggles doing that are the ones that tend to be a little bit more like the dinosaurs.
So let me back up a minute here for those in the back, because I realize I skipped right over something. What is greenwashing? Let's start there. Let's talk about greenwashing and what that is.
So greenwashing, put simply, is when a corporation, we'll get into more detail in a sec, but let's say corporations for now, when they wrap themselves in the language of sustainability, of being good for the planet, being good for people, but the reality might not be so altruistic. So they might do something like they love to use green packaging. And this is what we call in the marketing world the use of semiotics. Semiotics is the science of using symbolism to denote meaning. So if you see a package that's green, you assume, oh, must be sustainable because it's green, or oh, that has a cute picture of flowers on it. That must be good. So that is the use of scientific neurological marketing tactics to try to convince you of something that may or may not be true. Maybe it is true. Maybe it's a good company, but you probably need to do a bit of research to be sure. So that's one way. The next is they often like to misdirect you. So they will load you up with jargon, statistics. They will make you look in one direction, but not the other. Look at this cute picture of kids on the front of our sustainability report, but please don't look at the child labor we have in Bangladesh. Don't do that. So they'll misdirect you. And the third way is, especially for the really bad dinosaur sort of unsustainable companies, they will fund lobbying groups to influence politicians for their benefit. So these are the different ways that greenwashing in the corporate world manifests. So when you go to the store and you see a package that is talking about we're good for the earth, we have a green package, and we love you, do a bit of research and see if that's actually the case, because again, it might be, but 9 times out of 10, there's probably something going on beneath the surface. That's greenwashing all told. It doesn't happen all the time. I think it's actually becoming less and less pervasive over at least the last year, because consumers are not dumb. Like, we obviously know that's happening. We may not know what it's called, but we know when we're being lied to. So marketing departments are going one of two ways. They're either stopping the greenwashing, which is great, we want to see that, or they're investing more money into being even better liars, which we don't want to see, but that's also happening. So that's a bit of a brief overview of what greenwashing is. But as I was doing the research for my latest book, I thought, okay, do corporations, case studies, talk about it, great, be done. I'm peeling back the layers. I'm going, oh gosh, it's governments, they're doing it. Oh my gosh, it's the UN's doing it. Oh no, the International Olympic Committee and FIFA. Oh my gosh, they're doing it. Then I peeled it back further. Oh my God, of course the celebrities are doing it too. Of course the influencers are doing it. Obviously, I totally forgot about them. And then at the end of the book, I also say, wait a minute, okay, since I've done all these other segments, why not turn the mirror the other way and look at us? Are we doing it too in our own individual lives, and doing a bit of a challenge for people like we talked about a second ago, to see if we're not sort of lying to ourselves and saying we're doing more than we actually are. So long story short, everybody's greenwashing. So just be careful, because we're being lied to, which should not come as a shock to most people. Marketers lie.
Not. No, a bigger shock to me. The bigger shock to me was when you said consumers are not dumb. But I'll let that go. I see what's in my grocery store, and I wonder sometimes. But this is how I know that
we make bad
John
choices,
is a really nice guy.
It's that diplomatic background showing itself again.
Definitely. I also was. I mean, you've been doing this for pretty much your whole professional and student career. What pushed you this way? Were your parents the first Earth Day people? Were your parents at the first Earth Day?
Oh God, they probably were, actually. I don't know. I've never asked. No, my mom was a total hippie for sure, Southern California hippie. But I don't know if that was my reason for getting into this. I think I've just always had that sort of do goody kind of bent. I think everybody from Southern California does. I think we're kind of born with it. It's cultural. But I always knew I wanted to go work at the United Nations. That was sort of my thing. That's what I went to school for. I
Oh,
moved to
wow.
New York for grad school to go work there and got a job, which was amazing. But after I stepped out of the organization and went into consulting, funny story, I took a trip to Shanghai and just for a vacation and just absolutely fell in love with the place. So I decided to uproot myself and move over to China. I needed to figure out a way, though, to take all of that public sector experience, the do-gooder government sort of stuff, because even in consulting, I was still working with public sector clients. How do I do that in a commercial city like Shanghai? And for anybody who hasn't been to Shanghai, Shanghai is capitalism on steroids. You take, New York City, you take Manhattan, you take Wall Street, and you mainline it some steroids, and you get Shanghai. It is the nuttiest place. So no room for public sector stuff there. And I fell into
Hmm.
sustainability. I think even before it was called sustainability. So working with corporations, I think they called it CSR back then, corporate social responsibility, and the rest is kind of
Wow.
history.
Hmm.
That's where I really, fell in love with mixing that public and private sector experience to make a better future.
That's awesome. So now my question goes to the consumer, the everyday person. You have traveled a lot around the world, and I know jet travel is not known to be
I
a
don't
great
have a
thing
private jet.
for
I do not have a
sustainability.
private
Oh,
jet.
you don't? Get
No.
one.
Just-
Come on. I want to go for a ride. But what is the, I won't say the worst. What is the hardest things on sustainability that individuals do, or the biggest changes maybe you could make as an individual to help with sustainability, or is it all small changes? Like maybe I'm barking up the wrong piece of plastic.
Do you want the real answer or the PC answer?
Well, we can't do PC answers anymore. It pisses people off. It just pisses people off, man. Even I, who understands some of the PC movement, I understand why it exists, but it even pisses me off. and I'm a very far left person. It's like,
So
man.
the number, and people aren't going to like this, so I hope they don't take this out of context. The number one thing that people can do to build a better future or to be more sustainable or better for the planet is have fewer children. And we don't like to talk about that because all of a sudden you hear that and people say eugenics, and I'm not building the John Pabon eugenics program. That's not what I'm talking about. If you look at it statistically, we are a very resource intensive animal. So the fewer there are on the planet, the more likely it is we're going to have a planet to live on. Statistics show that having one fewer child will emit something on the order of 60, I'm going to get the stats wrong, 60 million tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere by having one fewer child, which is exponentially more than, for example, driving an EV, which I think is 0.2, which is nothing compared to all of not having a child would bring. So I'm not saying don't have kids at all. I'm just saying if you're in a position to do so, think about having one fewer child, because that will have a massive positive impact on the future of the planet. There's a thing called carrying capacity, which is the Earth can only sustain so much. We're close to 10 billion people. If not, we're already at 10 billion, I think, which continues to grow day by day. And there's only so much we can do when it comes to resources, food, water, space. We got plenty of, that's fine. But those other resources that we need to survive, that's the biggest thing we can do. And again, people don't like to talk about that. If you want to do something else that doesn't require, not having fewer children, then I think it really is this one thing. And this is more psychological than anything else. But I always tell people, you can do anything, but you cannot do everything. I didn't come up with that. I don't know who did, but that's my truism. So pick what it is you want to do when it comes to building a better future. I think a lot of times as altruists, people that care, we want to do everything, right? We want to adopt every dog, feed every homeless person, and go read to the elderly on the weekends. We can't do that because you're going to burn yourself out. So pick that thing that you're most passionate about, that you have a special skill in, or perhaps if you're financially well off, you can contribute to. We need money. and stick with that. Be sort of put your blinders on and just focus on that one thing, confident in the knowledge that there are billions of other people around the world picking up in every other way that you can't. But by bringing your best self to whatever your passion point is, you're going to contribute more and you're going to contribute for the long term. Remember, we're talking long term here with sustainability. So whatever is going to get you out of bed in the morning to contribute to a better future, focus on that one thing. So those are the two things. That's the un-PC and the PC answer to your question.
That's great. I've had this opinion forever, the un-PC opinion. I don't have kids, but it's not because of sustainability. That's just how things worked out. And I know there is not a movement. There's more and more younger people not having kids and not getting married. And I think part of that is just how society is changing a little bit. But when I say more and more, I think it's a teeny percentage. So, I think people kind of need to hear that. It's also to be okay with not having kids. It seems like there's a huge push, and I assume this is part of capitalism, but there's a lot in America about having more kids. And, part of it is people my age that want their retirement paid for and stuff like that. That's part of it. I know that capitalism is based on more and more people. It's one of the reasons I wish there was a quicker answer to change it, or at least even make it as it was thought of originally, which is not what's happening now. But yeah, I'm glad you gave both answers. Those are both really good answers. And it's hard. I don't know. I don't know why it's so hard for people to hear that, but I think most of it is because of the incredible amount of marketing, even your tax dollars towards having less kids. Of course, more education actually equals less kids. I think that came out of, I forget the book. It's about math and how things change. But as education goes down, people have more kids because it's one way to get money if you're very poor. So as we lift people up more, you actually naturally we would have less kids. But I also like that, pick one thing, because like you say, there are so many people doing another thing. I'm actually hoping that some genius gamer or someone programs AI the opposite way that everyone's worried about. Everyone's worried about AI doing bad things, and it already is. But what if you could program AI to fix things, which you can, I'm sure, in a very short amount of time. We could have AI programmed so all that false information it gives out good information, not false information. It combats things and makes people want to be more sustainable.
The tech for good movement has been a massive part of the sustainability conversation for a few years, about a decade now, and to varying degrees of success. So I think one of my favorite examples, and this is pre the AI that we know now, so I'm talking 2014, 15, the big tech companies went into a lot of factories in places like China, and they used technology to streamline these factories. I know that sounds very dystopian to say it that way, but what I'm thinking in my head of what happened is, as an example, one company came in and they would use AI to scan a factory to look for any potential issues of, I don't know, somebody's going to break their neck falling over something, or that's a potential hazard over there. So using AI for that, great little social part of sustainability, using AI to actually take over the jobs of workers in a good way. I know people don't like to hear that part, but when we think of factories, and I know a lot of people listening probably have never been inside a factory, you get these images of people doing manual labor, rote things that are just making widgets, and there's thousands of people in there. It's hot, it's dusty, it's disgusting. That's not what factories look like anymore. So factories, essentially, you go in, it's dead quiet because all it is machines and maybe 3 or 4 people running around making sure the machines are doing what they're supposed to. And that's because of the rise of technology, and that's a great thing. Technology is not going to take over all factory jobs. That's impossible because there are still things that need actual human beings, which is great. But for those companies that have done this, especially in places like China, manufacturing center of the world, That's allowed all the people that used to do the manual labor back in the 1980s to upskill themselves and have a better standard of living. So it goes back to this idea of transitioning people into something better. And I think that is a great example of how tech can be used for good. It's not all, dystopian Terminator stuff. Like tech can be, and I hope it continues to be a force for good, increasingly so.
Well, and even in that, he comes back as a good guy.
Well, that's it.
He goes back the second time, and he's good. I actually worked in a factory that made not motorhomes, but motor coaches, which are buses that are turned into. And they were using, I was brought in there to help them, as a temp, to help them do a new kind of manufacturing that based on Japanese ideas of how to make cars and organizing everything a lot better, giving workers what they need when they need it, not piling everything in having stations. The workers were really annoyed by it. But, when I think about it, it was a far more efficient way to do things. They didn't need to order stuff ahead of time as much. They didn't, they just used what they needed. And then when they needed more, they would get it. So, it's interesting. That kind of stuff and that was a long time ago. So, nothing to do with AI, but it was, let's see, can I do this? Yeah, I'm using AI right now. I'm using AI for my video. If I turn my AI off, it messes everything up. Let's see. Here's my AI stuff. There's all my AI.
Oh, yeah.
It really, really is impressive to me. I was like, wow, that's incredible. It's such a little thing, but yeah.
It's amazing, though.
It's everywhere. Let's see if I asked my wife to write down some things just in case. So do you feel like you're getting your message out? You have actually done a lot just personally. You've been on over 30 podcasts. You've been on dozens of network television and different types of media. That's what I'm looking for. You've been on all kinds of media. Does it feel like it's getting out there for you? And and follow-up question, do you have your own podcast?
I'll do the follow-up first. I don't have my own podcast, but it is on the list of to-dos for the year. Once I'm done launching my book in North America, March 12th, shameless plug. So that's after that marketing fiasco is done. I think I will do a podcast or a YouTube channel or something. But I found that TikTok has been amazing. Honestly, it's been amazing for getting a message out in a way that is really conducive to what I'm trying to do. Because for a lot of social media, getting a message like I have out in a 30-second clip is, needless to say, impossible.
Right.
But with TikTok, you can do longer form content. And so I think podcasts and YouTube will offer the same opportunity. So definitely love that. And I love the interaction capabilities on TikTok where you can actually, go live and talk to people and answer these deep questions that people have that you can't do in a 5-second soundbite. Your first question, though, is my message getting out? I think it's a continuous process, and I am probably going to be hard on myself and say that it is not getting out as much as I want it to, but that's also a little challenge and a fire under my own butt to keep going. If I look at it, taking a step back and looking at it objectively, I think it's getting out there. I hope it's getting out there. Because every little bit does help. I think the sometimes the issue that I face is in getting the message out there in a way that people can understand, because a lot of the message that I'm sharing, I'm very passionate and I am solid in my position, and the things I'm talking about is different than what most people have heard before. And so it's not just about talking the message of sustainability, building a better future, but having to get people over that psychological hump of, what? This guy is just, this is polar opposite of what I've heard before. And maybe I agree with it, maybe I don't, but it's going to take me a while to at least sit down and listen to this guy. So I think that's my biggest impediment. But none of that means I'm going to change my message, because this is going to sound so arrogant, and I love it. My message is right. So why change it?
You're right. Everyone else
I'm right. You're wrong. Sometimes you got to have that confidence.
It's true. It's true. I could use a little of that. I mean, partly why after doing about 20 podcasts, I realized that part of having the podcast was to have people like you on it to see, if there's any small way I can help get these kind of messages out there. I have all kinds of guests, but this is the kind of thing I really like.
Thank you. And I think as well, there's a lot of preaching to the choir that happens, and that's amazing. I love talking to other people that love sustainability, that are already part of the 1% that care, not the elite 1%, the 1% that care. But it's the other 99% of people that either have their heads in the ground or in the sand, or are, they don't know the questions they need to ask. They don't know what they don't know. Getting to them is very, very important. So getting out of this bubble of, sitting on a panel full of a room of people who are already in the profession, that doesn't interest me. I know I should probably be doing that, and that's where a lot of my professional colleagues, what they do. But why? We already know everything. So why talk to somebody who has the same opinion? You want to challenge people to change their opinions in the work that I do, or else we're just going to keep running in circles on this fun little hamster wheel of a timeline that we've managed to find ourselves in.
And that's a really good point. I mean, I don't have very many political guests, or none, because the only ones I would want to have is people I agree with. And what's the point of that?
Yeah.
I mean, there's kind of a point to it, but So it's one of those things. It's a hard thing to do. Yeah, I think you should. You're really good presenter. You present yourself really well. So you're a natural for having a podcast and having other guests in that agree with you and are also right. But it's great that your social media stuff has taken off. Because I know how much work that is. I mean, I have very small channels. They're mostly focused on very niche kind of things, flight simulator and stuff. But so I know how much work it takes to make something go. And with all I'm reading your accomplishments on your multiple web pages. I also had a question. Do you ever sleep?
So I sleep quite well, which is funny enough. It's weird because yes, I probably shouldn't. I think the reason why it goes back to this idea of doing anything but not everything. So compartmentalizing what it is I do. I think that has been just a game changer in terms of helping me bring my best self to the work that I do. If I was maybe, earlier on in my career, and I look back at my time, especially at the United Nations, trying to do it all as a young professional, that's exhausting. I'm exhausted thinking about that. And I'm sure I was exhausted back then. But when I started to compartmentalize to the point that it was late last year, I was at a conference speaking, and on a sustainability panel with a group of people who care, which is funny enough that we just talked about that. But afterwards, they came up to me and they said, you talk a lot about how that's not your responsibility, that's not your job, that's not what you do, a lot of nots. And I said, yeah, because if I said, oh yeah, I do X, Y, and Z, then I'm not being true to myself. So I think it even comes out in how I present what I do is, no, this is what I do. This is we'll use niche. You just said niche. This is my niche. This is my thing. Everybody else is handling their stuff. And that's a big, coming to moment to be able to do that with yourself, especially when it comes to altruism, where you're supposed to, on the surface, care about everything. There's plenty of stuff I don't care about. I think one of the first lines I said when we just started talking was, I don't care about the trees and the bears. So I think that, to answer your question, has been my saving grace of being able to get sleep, is a focus. That was a long-winded answer to your short question. Focus, people.
Focus. That's good though. That's an important thing, because it was a serious question. It's like, wow, you do accomplish a lot. Just being on multiple podcasts always blows my mind. That people, because a lot of people I have on have been on dozens and dozens and dozens, and it's a lot. It's kind of a lot to do. So I was curious. What you don't care about bears? Have you?
I mean, I care about the bears, but I'm not spending 12 hours a day working to help them. There's somebody already doing that. Yeah.
There's only a few species that are in real trouble. Most bears are in good shape, really good shape. Black bears doing fine. Don't
Except
go
the
near them.
chlamydia-laden koalas. The poor thing.
Oh yeah,
There's
the koalas.
There's a gonorrhea.
Those are some of the few. Those are some of the ones that are are in trouble. Koalas, polar bears, grizzly bears. Although they're coming back in the U.S. They're scaring people because they're coming back so much. But I don't know. This is a sidetrack, but I just recently found out or was reminded that grizzlies used to be everywhere. They used to have grizzlies in California. They had grizzlies all over Oregon and Washington. Almost every state had grizzlies in it. And I think the only state that does now is Wyoming and maybe little parts of Idaho. Oh, Montana, Wyoming, and of course Alaska. But that's pretty amazing. They were nearly wiped out completely. And they're just, anyway, that's a different subject.
No, I mean,
it does have to do with sustainability as well.
Exactly, it does. Yeah, I think and this is maybe a bit of a downer, but I know it's winter where you are, but maybe in the summertime when you go on a road trip or whatnot, take just a look of how many bugs end up on your windshield and compare that to where it might have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. I currently live in Australia and it's summer here, and we love to go on road trips. There are not as many bugs on the windshield. And the reason I bring that up is it shows the level of species extinction that's going on. And hopefully, even with bugs, which are a very important part of everything that goes on in the world, we start to bring them back like we have some of the other bigger mammals that exist.
Well, and the thing about bringing big mammals back is that they affect everything. It's like they brought wolves back to Yellowstone, which really upset a lot of people, but they're having effects that they had no idea would happen because of what they do. They're doing their wolf things, and trees are growing along the river again, and like all these species, the beavers are healthy again because of wolves, and all these different things. It's interesting. So yeah, little changes. Maybe there could be a bug like that. As long as it's not a mosquito, we don't. But
mosquitoes, I just don't like. Singapore managed to get rid of mosquitoes. I don't know why we can't do it everywhere else.
Because it's deadly.
I want to get rid of them. That's the thing. I hate them.
The ways to get rid of them. It's the way. I don't know if getting rid of mosquitoes will hurt environmentally, but the way we get rid of them.
Yes,
that's what DDT was for. Yeah, it's nasty. They're tough. They're tough little buggers. Yeah,
they're full of disease, so we don't need them.
That's true.
I'm sure they are part of the food chain somewhere. I know, but
somehow we're the biggest killers on the planet.
Absolutely
Mosquitoes.
they are.
They're the deadliest animal on the planet, but mostly in Africa. So
yes,
but they must. Do you have disease from mosquitoes in Australia?
There is a bit, not in the big cities, but
the cities.
Certainly in some of the more remote areas, it does exist. We don't have. I don't think there's dengue here, but certainly mosquito-borne illnesses. Yeah.
You have your malaria.
They're the size of there's the size of cars here. So
yeah, I bet they are.
Everything's bigger.
We go to Hawaii a lot, and there's these little. I don't even know if they're mosquitoes. There's little bugs you don't see, and then you've got all these bites when you go in at night. It's like, where did these come from?
Just hope you have your shots.
Yeah, exactly. They're harmless, completely harmless. Oh, geez. Well, it's really been great talking to you. The work you do is fantastic. It really is. But I guess I'll wrap it up for you so that we don't have to so you can do more podcasts. You can get out there and do more stuff. So you've been listening to Were You Still Talking? This is Joel Albrecht, and on my show today was John. I've already forgotten the pronunciation. Pabon?
Perfect.
All right, nice.
You got it.
We've been talking sustainability, and I'll have links. I think I'll have a lot of links to his work in the show notes. Please go there. Please check out his work, and I'll be sure and clip the non-PC bit so everyone can see that. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hopefully, I will be getting more of these out this year than I did last year, now that I have my power back. Thanks so much. And as I always say, be good to each other and be good to yourselves.